Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper, CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group. It's 2023, and we are excited to be back for another episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day and help you make sense of what they mean, as well as understand how they impact you and your organization and what you might do about it. Joining me today is my friend, David Turetksy. David is an HR tech, data, and compensation geek. His words. Geek. He is a VP of consulting at Salary.com, where he helps companies with auditing their HR IT data and structures, people analytics, which I know is very near and dear to him, and of course, still working with those thorny compensation issues. Mm-hmm. He's also been the project lead for compensation data exchange of the HR XML HR Open Initiative. And he has his own podcast, the HR Data Labs, which you should listen to. For fun, David coaches his son's hockey team and still plays hockey himself. Wow. Mm-hmm. David and I go back a ways when I was with Mercer, and I think he was with Workscape, if I'm not mistaken. And we were both working on similar challenges with compensation technology.
That's right.
Welcome, David.
Thank you, Teri. Hopefully you had a very happy new year.
I did have a happy new year. I'm excited about 2023. I think it's going to be a big year.
I agree.
So I'm curious what position you play on the hockey team.
I'm a goalie.
All right.
Been a goalie my
very
whole
pivotal.
life. Yeah.
Pivotal role.
Yeah.
That
some say like the quarterback.
Well.
Some say the scapegoat.
Depends on the
I
game,
play all those
right?
roles. Huh?
Depends on the game, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So today, David and I are talking about the hot topic, pay transparency,
Yes.
What it means for you and your organization, and what you can do to prepare for changes that may be coming. So let's get into the huddle. So David, I guess you could say some of what we were doing back in the day when everybody else was worried about big computer meltdowns in 1999 was some of the early days of trying to make compensation data more transparent to managers, helping them make pay decisions. I mean,
Right.
Literally just putting some information in front of them where they could make decisions. And that was a big deal back then. It's changing, it's evolving, it's a little bit different today, although in the grand scheme, maybe not as different as we might think. Can you just give us a definition of what you think pay transparency is now, and maybe how you've seen it change evolve over the last 15 years or so?
It's a great question, Teri. I think pay transparency has definitely changed rather dramatically from being something that the most progressive organizations would do to share information about what does a job make, what is the market for a job. And it has become a lot bigger than that, given the fact that now there are laws which specifically mandate that companies disclose to candidates for jobs on the job requisition, on job posting, what the starting ranges are or starting rates are for a job before a candidate even applies. You mentioned, way back when. Well, way back when we were talking about potentially opening up what we called the kimono back then and said, hey, we want to share what our programs are all about and open up our salary ranges and show people what the possibilities are if they moved around an organization, if they took promotional opportunities. And of course, there were red flags. Well, we don't want to show them the managerial ranges. We don't want to show them the executive ranges. Hush, hush. We can't do that. And we can't show managers outside their area. Certainly can't show them data that doesn't relate to them. And some of that mistrust, was specifically down to the lack of training, right? We didn't train managers on how to use the market data. We didn't train managers on how to look at the ranges or utilize the ranges. We specifically gave them understanding about why the ranges exist, but we didn't really go beyond that. I think pay transparency is kind of transformed. We're now living in the world of the internet, and people can look up what a job could be making, whether that's by looking at self-reported data or some sort of survey data. And so the ubiquity of data now kind of makes it a little bit of, I don't want to say passé, but we can find the data if we really wanted to. But now regulations are specifically targeting something very specific, which is they're trying to make pay equity a reality by bringing down the walls of having obfuscation in how much a job is worth in an organization and how much it should be paid. So long-winded answer of saying that we're trying to get to pay equity by opening up the ranges and then opening up the pay opportunities for a job so that people can know before they actually interview, before they actually get to the stage of asking how much does this job pay. We can't get bargains anymore. Companies aren't allowed to make a different offer to one person than they would to another. That's what we're specifically getting to in this version of pay transparency. I think it's a laudable goal that we're trying to make the level playing field for everyone so that when a person is going to try and apply for a job, that we're giving them the same opportunity no matter who they are, no matter what color, no matter what race, ethnicity, no matter what background, they're all getting the level playing field.
Yeah, one of the things that I've seen, though, is these ranges that people are starting to post are pretty big, right? And obviously there are nuances and things about the individual's experience and capability that they bring to the table,
Sure.
right? That's going to impact how much that offer ultimately is.
Well, so the guidance that's been given based on the laws that have been enacted fall in line with you're going to have a job description and the rates should be reasonable for that job description. And yes, while there are differences and there are acceptable differences in why people do get paid differently, whether that's education, whether that's experience, those differences are valid. And that's why there's a range. The range of pay can't be 50,000 to 150,000. You can't make them wide enough that you can fit the entire company into them. It has to be relevant to the position. And so there is some teeth in those laws that say that if you post a range that isn't a kind of a reference range that doesn't make sense, then the person who is applying for that job can report you to, if it's New York City, to the Health and Human Services Department, or in California, I think it's to the Labor Department. And there's some teeth in that law. There's some serious fines for noncompliance. And noncompliance is posting ranges that are ridiculous. And so while there is a need to have some differentiation between people who are qualified and people who are uber qualified, absolutely. You can't make that be just the kitchen sink as far as the range goes. It has to be a relevant range. So people need to do their homework, or companies need to do their homework to make sure that they're paying fairly for that role.
Yeah, I know a lot of states are starting to enact this. States and local governments are enacting some of their own specific laws, and organizations are really just trying to figure out what to do. Before we talk, because I do want to talk about some of the legislation, but before we do that, people sort of bristle when they hear pay transparency, because again, it sounds like what you're telling me is that the primary goal right now is really focused on the ranges and understanding where the job that they're applying for, what that range is, and then possibly being able to compare themselves to and look to other potential opportunities in the organization in those ranges. It's not about everybody talking about how much they make and putting out an annual paper that says, here's everybody's salaries in the organization, right?
Right. It is not. And one of the things I think people do misunderstand is that while the laws are trying to get people to understand pay in an organization, it does not mandate that organization, as you say, to disclose everything. Although it does specifically in some circumstances say you can't fire people for talking about it. So when I worked at an investment bank way back in the early 90s, and we said to people, we're going to terminate you if you talk about pay, it's not legal anymore. So I like that part. But I think pay transparency kind of falls into two different camps. One is the external pay transparency, which is telling candidates about pay and telling them about what the value proposition is to working at an organization based on how much do you pay, and it could be about total reward. That's great. But it's also about internally communicating how does pay work? Because if you're going to have a posting and it's going to have a range of what a job makes in this organization on the web, I will bet pretty heavily that your current employees are going to look at that and say, well, wait a minute, what about us? Why aren't you communicating this to us? And so there needs to be that effort internally to talk to employees, to talk to supervisors and managers, and as well to talk to leadership and other stakeholders, including your investors, and tell them about pay. How do we pay? What's our philosophy on pay? What do our job descriptions look like? Do they need to be cleaned up? Making sure people understand why they're getting paid what they're paid, meaning not necessarily that you should show them their market data, although that's a really good step forward. Train them on what it means. How are the grades derived? How were why your ranges derived the way they are? Having good foundations for it, having a good job architecture around your job structures. So people understand what job I'm in and what job I could go to in my career and how my career path works. All those are positives, but they don't exist today in most organizations. Most organizations have this obfuscation where I'm doing my work. I have blinders on. I don't need to know about other things, which could cause people to look elsewhere, to look outside. Well, now with transparency, you can't do that anymore. Blinders have to come off. And people now need to see what possibilities there might be inside my organization, where my career could go, what my current package is like, how did you derive it? But also, where could my career go? And what does that mean for my pay in the future? Having those things and being able to discuss your value proposition to your employees, those are all good things. So to me, pay transparency has really these two effects. You have to have an external strategy, obviously, and now you have to have an internal strategy. Because if you separate the two, you're going to find managers who are going to come screaming at you saying, look, you now have to post all these ranges. You need to arm us with understanding why and what, and how do we deal with people who are paid under in those jobs you're posting externally? What if we have people paid underneath those rates? What do we do? And the answer is we need to come up with a strategy. Having no strategy is not a strategy.
Right. That's absolutely right. Yeah. And I think, that's where I think people are looking for answers, sort of where do I start, right? How is this going to affect me and my business, whether I'm in a state or locale that has a law or not? And quite frankly, with the, work from home and remote work, many companies now are being faced with having people working in places that they didn't have them work before, right? So they're now subject to different laws because people work from home in those locations.
Yeah.
So it's really impacting people differently. And one of the things that I noticed when I, was looking at some of the compliance issues is that this is really impacting companies with as few as 15 employees. And even the New York state law is like 4 or more. So this is down to the level of, I'm just starting a business and I've got 3 people that work for me.
Yep.
So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on how this impacts businesses from a size perspective? Because obviously the bigger businesses have bigger challenges. They've got a lot more people to communicate to, but the smaller businesses haven't really been, necessarily focused on this kind of thing. They're just trying to, get some staff, get the job started, get some things done. And now they're subject to some of the same laws that bigger companies are subject to.
So part of having a business or owning a business is complexity, right? There's complexity. There's always been complexity, whether it's IRS complexity, whether it's getting the right licensure, getting the right accountant. And to me, the ability to be able to operate effectively, whether we're talking about minimum wage or we're talking about other things, having employees is always a problem. And this just adds that next little bit of complexity. And I'd say that the technology that's on the web support an organization to be able to help, whether they're a very small business or a large business, to help support being able to get a job description with market data that they can use for posting. So I think it may make it a little bit more expensive for, as you say, because they're just getting started or they're small businesses and want to stay small businesses. It makes it a little more expensive to comply, but that's always the case with compliance and small businesses. So having just run a small business, and I know you run a small business, complexity is part of that, we always get surprised. Oh no, there's another requirement I need to, pay attention to. So that, that's, to me, that's noise that they need to deal with, but it's good, and it's good noise, and it gives them an ability to have and bring people closer together, because now they'll have a lot more information and feel like they're being treated more fairly. I think that the burden on larger organizations is they need to renovate that job table that they've had for a while and renovate their job architecture, because just saying that I have job descriptions doesn't cut it anymore. A lot of those job descriptions are years old. Even if you've done a renovation of your job table in 2019, they're different now. They're going to be different. They have to be. The world of work changed from 2019 to 2022, and now we're in 2023. Unbelievable. But the world starts, to me, and where to begin is the architecture of your jobs. How does work get done? And making sure that we have a good foundation for being able to understand what people do, so we can get the data to support how we're going to pay them and what their rates are. And as you know, Teri, the world of work has gone crazy lately around rates, where unskilled work is through the roof from a market perspective, and skilled jobs are floundering. And then managerial and supervisory jobs are getting a lot of compression issues because those unskilled labor rates are going through the roof. So doing your job architecture gives you that ability to then go back and look at the market and say, are we still paying relevantly, not just fairly, but are we still relevant in 2023, given all the changes that have happened from 2020 to 2022? So to me, there's a lot of good that happens when you start talking about compliance around transparency, which is we're finally opening back those structures. We're finally renovating those structures that are foundational to getting the work done. So to me, it's a good thing. I like to call things that we find that are errors or issues opportunities, so that they're opportunities for being able to fix things that weren't necessarily great to begin with.
Yeah. I think something like 1 in 4 workers are going to be covered by some of these laws in 2023. So we're not going back. We're definitely going forward.
Sure. Yeah.
And, this is interesting because these are age-old issues. I mean, these issues are no different than the ones we were dealing with, 20 years ago.
That's right.
Where people wanted to update their job tables. They wanted to write better job descriptions. They needed to market price their jobs. They needed to create better pay ranges so that they could understand how they were paying people across the organization, and, work with them on career pathing and all of those types of things. I mean, it's just age old.
It is.
I wonder how many people just haven't really thought about it from that perspective, and just need to restart the engine, right? Like, what are the things, as we talk about what we need to do, what are some of the concrete steps that we and the people listening to this right now should do right now to start preparing for what's coming, or what may already be in their states or principalities? And, what would help them to get this off the ground?
Well, the first thing I would do is talk to my general counsel to make sure that we're not out of compliance today. Make sure that you go and spend time with general counsel, asking them about the labor laws that have now changed as of 1/1/2023. Critical. First step. And then where there are gaps, especially where there are gaps in pay transparency, we need to fix the process first before we address renovating ranges or changing job titles or job descriptions or whatnot. Fix what's bleeding so that you're not out of compliance and don't get fines. And then the next step. So the third step out of this is, after making sure you're in compliance, the third step is having a plan and talking to leadership about embracing or semi-embracing pay transparency. You have to embrace it in some way, but whether you embrace it fully and change your culture to do that, or whether you're just changing your pay programs to be able to be more open and more transparent, the third step is to talk to leadership and make sure they understand what its effect on the organization is. To me, the fourth step, once you've gotten buy-in from the leadership, is to start looking at those structures that affect pay and that affect discussions around pay. Meaning, once you've fixed your philosophy and now you've gotten leadership to buy into it, now you have to go through your pay practices, whether they're base pay practices, whether they're variable pay practices, and make sure that we have documentation on each piece so that when you're communicating your programs, people have something tangible that they can look at, whether it's a new hire, whether it's a candidate, or whether it's a current employee. You have to be able to be transparent about all of the pieces of pay, even though some of the legislation talks about just base pay. We know that there are many organizations that they pay and then they pay in variable pay. And I would be much more conscious of variable pay as well. We don't want to run afoul of laws just because we say, well, technically it didn't mention variable pay. Okay, well, what'll happen after that is that the legislature will go, yeah, and variable pay as well. We've seen the SEC make rapid changes to their regulations based on making incremental updates based on things like that. So to me, the fifth step is making sure your programs talk to your new philosophy. And then once you've gotten all those things that are foundational, then you go back and you look at your structures, whether it's your job architecture, whether it's the documentation around jobs, and then your ranges, making sure your ranges are up to date. Once you have all that together, the last step to me is then communicating to your managers, your supervisors, and your employees about what these new things are and why they need to pay attention to them. And then the last piece is the remediation plans that need to happen based on any new ranges, any new updates, anything that happens that the employees go, well, there's a gap here. What are you going to do about it? Well, obviously, we can't change or fix everybody's pay all in 1 year. So we have to create a long-term strategy for making pay updates, getting people to market or getting people to the ranges that we're now posting so that people have a strategy for understanding getting from here to here doesn't need to be so scary. And the CFO especially will need to be brought into that process. So to me, it's like almost a 7-step process of getting from, oh my God, where are we now to and now the employees know, and here's our strategy for fixing everything.
No, I think that's great. I think about that conversation with legal, that initial conversation, because that's really important to better understand where are we impacted right now and what are the things we need to be thinking about. And hopefully legal is prepared to discuss those things or will be prepared to discuss them. I think,
to be honest, they're not going to be. No,
yeah,
I mean, there's so much that's changing in the world of labor law that they'll probably have a labor lawyer that they'll have to reach out to. And we know that there are some phenomenal people that have stayed on top of what's happening with pay equity and pay transparency law. We partner with some of them and they're up to the moment on it. So it probably will need the general counsel to talk to some of these external counsel as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say give them a heads up that this is what you want to talk about so they can be prepared to have this conversation.
Sure.
And then I think about the gaps in the process and sort of the plan. I do think communication has to be a big part of that plan. Like, how are we going to communicate and if we know what the gaps are, then we know what we have to fix.
Yeah.
And I'm curious your thoughts on, I know detailed communication comes at the end, but should you be communicating to people now? Hey, we're evaluating this. We're working on these things. Here's where we want to be by, the end of this year, for example.
I would say that once you get leadership buy-in as to what the strategy is and what the plan is, that once the leadership has bought in, then you must go to the organization and start talking to them about it. Can't go before then, because if there's a fundamental disagreement on how to act on this, you're promising things to employees that you can't deliver. So once you have that leadership discussion, absolutely have to talk to employees, because you're going to start posting with ranges, and you're going to be putting the managers in the crosshairs of every employee who say, I'm not paid that. How are you going to get me to that? Well, if they don't have those communications and you're not being open and honest with employees and managers, it's going to bite you big time. And we don't want this to be something that HR gets looked at and go, why didn't you help us as HR? This is your thing. You need to help us around pay. So you're absolutely right, Teri. Communication is the heart of everything we have to do in this. But it definitely has to come after you. A, make sure you have a problem or don't have a problem with your general counsel, and B, that the leadership team buys into the philosophy. Once you have that, then you should be able to develop a communication strategy that your leadership team buys into, and probably want to have them be the mouthpiece of this, not HR. Obviously, HR has to be involved, but make sure that this is a company issue. This is a business issue. It's not as much an HR issue.
Yeah, it has to come down from the top.
Absolutely.
HR, or otherwise HR is the scapegoat, right?
Always.
Yeah. For anything that goes wrong in the process. The other thing I think it impacts is that you mentioned this a little bit earlier. You said brand, the company's brand, and how they're viewed, not just internally by the employees that are going to be impacted by this, but externally by people who want to come to work for them.
Yeah.
And I see that as playing a big part in that conversation, and building that plan is, what is our messaging? And, do you see marketing or other parts of the organization getting involved in this process?
If you're a good teammate, then you'd bring all parties in. But yes, marketing has to be a part of this, because it is about your brand and it is about who you are as a company. I don't think Apple makes a move without making sure that marketing knows and understands what kind of message it's going to send to do something, whether it's an employee related thing or not. And I know we've seen companies like Walmart make a lot of marketing splash with their dramatic changes to pay packages, as well as to market and to how they see themselves in the market, as well as their programs around training and education. So yes, I agree with you. It has to do with how you want to be seen in the marketplace for consumers, for candidates, for jobs, as well as for employees. Who you are as an organization isn't just, what's said on Super Bowl commercials. It's how people think about you when they're going to try and, get a job with you. And if they have a really terrible experience on that, it will ruin their consumer experience as well. And we all know that because of the internet, any bad experience gets amplified a million times. So yes, it has to be done in conjunction with marketing to make sure that whatever we want our philosophy be, and how we're going to be compliant, or how we're going to lead, whether it's New York or California or Colorado, any of these states that now have pay transparency laws, marketing's got to be involved.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people involved. It really is a corporate effort to be smart here and to do things right, and not to leave people out, because anybody that doesn't know what's going on is going to probably pass on information that may not be accurate, right? So you want them to be engaged in the process.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is there one thing that you would give people advice on what not to do?
Yeah, like you mentioned before, broad ranges. Don't just think that compliance is going to be okay with, and don't think that the states aren't going to look and say, you just dialed this in by just giving, people a $50,000 to $150,000 or, $250,000 pay range on their posting. That ain't going to work. People are going to call you out on it, and those fines are very heavy. I would also say this is one of those things you can't say that the dog ate my homework. It doesn't matter. The world of compliance knows that if you don't do your homework, you will get fined significantly. And those fines are very public. And this is really bad. This is a bad look for companies who do not do their homework on this. So to me, the non-action in this is just not possible. You have to work on this. If you're in these states, and to be honest, these states have most of the employees in the US. So if you're not thinking about how you're going to comply with California and New York and some of these other state laws, I don't know what you're thinking. You got to get on top of this. So inaction is not a possibility in this. You have to think about how it's going to affect you in 2023, whether you have employees in states that are affected or not. You have to get on top of this and know that your state is probably one of those that are next, or if not, it's coming. And I think you mentioned this before, Teri, that if you have remote employees in these other states and they can possibly be in New York or California, you have to comply with those laws. You have to post a range. It's not like where you could post a thing that says, if this range only applies if you're in California or Colorado or New York. That's not going to work anymore.
Right. And even if you're a small company, we're a small company and we've got employees in at least 5 states. So, we have the same issues as a larger company who, may just have employees in a couple of states.
And I think one of the ways you can get around that is many organizations are looking at taking a national approach to pay, which is, let's use the index, the US average for pay, and we'll give geographic differentials for where people live that are either relatively high or relatively low. And if you move from that relatively high to a relatively low paid area, your geographic differential goes away and you get whatever that geographic differential is in that area. So while you can post the national range, and again, I'm not giving legal advice, by the way, but you can post the national range and say, you're paid index based on whether it's CPI or Air Inc. or wherever you're getting your geographic differential from, that we're going to apply a geographic differential to whatever municipality or state or city you're in. And that's how we're going to derive your pay. I don't know if that'll pass muster for some of these for some of the currently passed legislation, but it's a strategy. And some of our organizations that we work with are actually employing that strategy today.
Yeah. I would say check with your legal counsel.
Exactly. Talk to your legal counsel, whether that makes sense for you.
Yeah.
We're not lawyers. We don't play one on television.
So I think, one of the big advice, is don't wait. Don't procrastinate this. David and I were just talking before we started this podcast about our ability to procrastinate.
Yeah.
This is not something that you want to procrastinate on because it's not going to get any easier.
No.
More states are coming into the fold this year. So your job is just going to get bigger as those laws increase. So I would say, don't wait, get ahead of this, start having conversations with your legal counsel, your leadership, bring them into the fold, start getting a handle on what this is going to look like. And as David said, I think his recommendations, what are some of the gaps you have today? What are they? Be prepared to have those conversations with your leadership and to get their buy-in into what a plan will be to execute to try to solve for these challenges in the organization. There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Especially if you are in California, New York, Colorado, and you haven't paid attention to this, you cannot procrastinate anymore.
Yeah.
The new year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, 2023. Get on it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic, David. I think we could probably do a whole nother show on diving into the details and
let's do it. Not procrastinate.
We're not going to procrastinate that. In fact, we didn't procrastinate the show. We came in this morning and said, oh my gosh, it's like the first day back. Do we really want to do this? And then we said, let's do it.
Exactly.
So thank you for coming on. I want to tell our listeners just really quick, we just launched the 2022-2023 HR Systems Survey Annual Report over the holidays. So many of you might have missed it because you might have already been off. It's available for download now on the website at sapientinsights.com. You can also drop us a line there, schedule a chat on the website. So visit us. David, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on today. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Teri. It's been my pleasure, and Happy New Year as well.
I want to thank a couple of other people real quick. Kelly and the whole Brand Method Media Group who helps us with producing our podcasts, and our marketing team, Lisa Rinko and Zoe Britton. Looking forward to getting this out and published in the next few days. And thanks to our listeners who we couldn't do this without you. So thank you for listening. That's all the time we have today. If you enjoyed the episode, you can subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app. Leave a review if you have a minute, and follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, all those good social media spots. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.